Hi, everybody. My name is ChanningShephard, and welcome to my presentation today for GIST 909. Today, I am going to be presenting on my semester project. I chose to do a habitat sustainability analysis of the kit fox in Colorado for my project. And this will be the presentation agenda for today as follows. First, we'll go through the introduction and some background information that I deem is helpful for the audience. From there, we'll look at the methods that were used for this project. From there, we'll look at the results. And I have a couple of maps to show you for the results. And then we'll move into the discussion and conclusion and kind of talk about what the results mean. And from there, I will open it up for questions. So moving right along, like I said, we'll start with the introduction. The kit fox, or also known by its scientific name, the Vulpes macrotus, it is the smallest fox in North America. For many folks who might be wildlife enthusiasts and see this photo, they might think, oh, it looks somewhat familiar. The kit fox is actually really closely related to the swift fox. The kit fox can be found throughout a large portion of the United States. That includes Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, California, and up into the Midwest. The kit fox lives in a variety of climates, primarily in the short grass plains. However, they can live in forests as well as deserts. They are a very adaptable mammal because of their diet. Their diet consists a lot of birds and other rodents and mammals, as well as insects, lizards, and some fruits. So that makes them omnivores. And during the 90s, there were some surveys conducted throughout Colorado that found that the kit fox population was drastically decreasing. And this was due primarily to two reasons. One was urban development. More and more people were moving into the state of Colorado, and the sort of metro areas became more populated, and it sprawled out into the habitats, into the areas where the kit fox has habitats. And then the second reason as well, obviously with expanded urban areas, you have more roads and more people driving on the roads, which leads to more driving accidents. There were a lot more people that were, the kit fox would run into the street or into the road and get hit by these moving vehicles. And so in 1998, that is when the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they listed the kit fox on the state endangered list because the population had dwindled so drastically. And so with all of that knowledge, I was thinking, well, this would be a great project for GIST 909. How can I use GIS? And so this question kind of formulated or came about, which is one that I wanted to use GIS to solve. And it is, are there other areas within the state of Colorado that would be more suitable for kit fox populations to be moved to? Because their habitats were being taken away by the urban development, I wanted to see, are there other parts where kit fox populations could be moved to and would be able to thrive there? And so for this study, I looked at the state of Colorado. Here I have a reference map that is showing, just to give kind of the layout of the state of Colorado. So here you can see sort of the north middle, kind of in the upper third in the middle, is Denver, which is the capital of Colorado. And you do have some more populous cities like Boulder, Longmont, Fort Collins, and south of Denver, you do have Colorado Springs. So this is kind of known as the Front Range. And these are all connected by the Interstate 25. And then to the west of that, you have the Rocky Mountains. Out here is a small town, Grand Junction. And to the east of the kind of network of cities, you have mainly grasslands, plains, a lot of agriculture, a lot of farmland out here since it is relatively flat compared to the mountainous west side of the state. And then all of these green lines here, as you can see from the legend down below, these are all of the major highways that go through the state. And then the blue areas are all lakes or rivers within the state. So now that you have a basic understanding of kind of the history of the kit fox and kind of the state of Colorado, we're going to move into the methodology. So for this, for helping to answer the research question that I posed earlier, there were 4 analysis factors that I wanted to look at. The first one being distance from highways, since that was a major contributor to the decline in the kit fox population. I wanted to look at areas that were further away from major highways. The second type was the land cover type. Although the kit fox is very adaptable, I did just want to look at areas that had trees and shrubs, since I knew from research that that is kind of their native areas that they thrive in. The third thing, or the third factor that I took into account with this study, was the distance from urban areas. Like I said earlier, urban development was kind of another contributing factor to the decline in their population. And so I wanted to specifically look at areas that were away from where there were large concentrations of human population. And then the fourth factor was just a closeness to water source. Obviously, them being a mammal, water is essential to life. And so it was really important that it is somewhere where there is water for them to be able to survive. And so looking at these, we kind of have a mix of environmental versus human factors that would help in this study. And then moving on. So those were the 4 criteria. And with those 4 criteria, there were 2 analyses that were done. One was the binary suitability analysis that basically looks at, it takes in all of these criteria either as yes or no, and it plots, or it finds areas where all of the 4 criteria match or are identified as yes in that area. And so from here with the highways, I was looking at areas that were 2 miles away from the highway. For urban areas, I was looking at areas that were 5 miles away from developed areas. For the land cover, I was looking for areas that had land cover that was equal to either trees or shrubs. And then for water sources, I was looking at areas that had a water source within 2 miles. And the box above is the data source that I used for each. And then this is the workflow that I performed in order to conduct the suitability analysis. And so for each data set, it first required some processing to be able to take out those areas that we were not looking at and to only find the areas that were suitable to the criteria that I listed out before. And then from there, I intersected all 4 of those data sets that were cleaned up to produce the output map that shows areas within the state of Colorado that meet all 4 of these criteria. Then the second analysis that I did was the weighted suitability analysis. And I used the same criteria. However, there was more weight given to some of the criteria, and it allows for a little more flexibility compared to the binary where it's either yes or no. With the weighted, you can tailorize it. You can tailor it to the needs that you want. And so these were the criteria that I had set out for the weighted suitability analysis criteria or analysis. So for highways, I was looking at areas that were either 2, 4, or 6 miles away. For urban areas, areas that were either 2, 5, or 10 miles away from developed areas. For land cover, we were only looking for the trees or shrubs. And then for water sources, we were looking at areas that were either 1, 2, or 3 miles away from a water source. And so with the weighted suitability analysis, it required a little more work through since there were more criteria that needed to be handled. And with this, what I ended up doing for each of the data sets was creating these buffers and then combining the buffers. And then from there, reclassifying the distances. And so that areas, for example, highways, areas that were 6 miles away from highways had a higher ranking than the areas that were not as far away from highways. And that's where the weighted portion comes in. So I was giving weight to more favorable criteria. And from there, after assigning the weight and combining all of those, it was able to produce a map that showed areas within the state of Colorado that were, it represented from most suitable to least suitable. And so as I mentioned earlier, because I was looking at this project through a human lens, meaning that most of the population decline was due to human actions, there was more weight that was given to the criteria for highways and urban areas. Compared to the land cover versus water sources, which you could deem as just environmental sources that we were looking at for the kit fox, for areas that they could potentially live in. So now I'll move into the results for both analyses. So the first one is the binary suitability analysis. This is the map that was the output at the end of the workflow. And so from here, you can see these red areas. These are all areas that signify where all 4 criteria were met. So if you remember, we were looking at highways that were 2 miles away. There was a water source within 2 miles. There was a urban development was within 5 miles away. And so all of these red pieces, or not pieces, but these red areas highlight areas where all 4 of those criteria are met, meaning that it would be a suitable location for the kit fox population to be moved to. As you can see, there is kind of this like break here. This is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of where the Front Range corridor is, where many of these populous cities are connected through I-25. So you can see a lot more red out in the mountains as well as in the flat plain fields compared to in the metropolitan areas. And this is the output from the weighted suitability analysis that we did. And so this took into account and ranked all of the criteria and shows areas from most suitable, which are yellow, to least suitable, which are red. As you can see, a lot of the least suitable red is in the metro areas that we were talking about earlier. And many of the most suitable areas are out in the Rocky Mountains. You can see here, if we go back, this is kind of where I-70 drives along, which is a major road in Colorado to get into the mountains. But we can see here these areas, these all match up and are deemed as most suitable for the kit population. So next, I'll just move into discussion and the conclusion and what this study means. And so one of the first things is, how can this be improved? So with this study, right, as I mentioned earlier, I was looking at it through the human lens of how we could move populations to help, how we could move the kit fox populations to areas that would help them from being further harmed from human impact. And so one of the things that could be improved would be to look at other environmental factors in this analysis, especially environmental factors that are pertinent to the kit fox survival, such as annual precipitation, temperature, elevation, different populations of food sources. This would help with maybe a more holistic approach and maybe a more realistic approach to identifying suitable areas. Another thing that could be improved would be to increase the study size. For this study, I only looked at the state of Colorado, but as I mentioned earlier, kit fox can be found all across the Midwest, New Mexico, Utah, out to the west in California. And so increasing the study size might also give totally different results. We can also look at different weighting schemes. In this study, we gave more weight to the human impact criteria versus the environmental impacts. And so that can also maybe produce other or show different results. Another thing that could be improved would also be to understand current populations. Where do the kit fox populations live currently? How does that impact into where they can be moved? That might also lead to further research questions later on when you are working in population management. How can they be moved? How do the populations need to be transported? Things like that. And the last thing is, how do future events have an impact? How, the human population continues to increase daily. How is that going to have an impact on the populations? As well as climate change. We know that climate change is happening, and it's having devastated impacts to different ecosystems, different areas. And so how are these changes to our climate? How will these have an impact on the population as well? These are all further things that I think would be good for more research and could be expanded upon with this study that I did. And then I wanted to look at kind of how this study could be used now. So the first thing, right, government agencies can use this to make policies that help with population management. Conservation organizations can use this study to conduct further research on the kit fox and find more concrete locations. As I mentioned earlier, using other environmental factors might be able to help identify more areas that were not identified in this study. Another entity that would benefit from this study would be future land planners. They can make sound decisions when it comes to developments so that they can help protect ecosystems and not cause further damage. Where can this study be applied? This can obviously be applied in Colorado, because that is where the study area is, but because the kit fox population doesn't just live in Colorado. They roam and move. They are very populous in other states. And so looking at the overall population and having a larger area size would also help with conservation efforts and might identify other areas outside of Colorado that were not identified in this study. And then why is this study helpful? Obviously, because the kit fox is an endangered species, in order to help from the kit fox from going extinct, we do want to protect and make sure that we're implementing efforts to help rehabilitate the population and make sure that the populations are getting to the size that they used to be. And the other thing is keeping ecosystems in balance. The kit fox is a omnivore. They are very critical to the ecosystems that they live in because they do provide population control for the animals that they feed, as well as the animals that prey on them. And so, in order to keep these ecosystems in balance, it is important that these populations remain in place. So yeah, that was the study that I conducted for this presentation, and I'll open it up to questions now.